If life suddenly feels empty, if the things that once filled you now feel hollow, if your days feel like someone pressed pause on your soul, this isn't depression and it's not burnout. You're in the early stages of a quantum shift, one that only a small percentage of beings ever experience consciously. Your emptiness isn't a void, it's a signal, a pulling, a dismantling of the reality your consciousness has outgrown. You know this feeling. It sits in your chest like a quantum vacuum, a space so empty it hums with potential energy you can't yet understand. The silence isn't just around you, it's within you, a vast hollow space where something vital once lived. You can't name when it started, this gradual evacuation of everything you once cared about, but now it dominates your existence with the precision of a cosmic force. Your coffee has grown cold in your hands, though you can't remember making it. Time has become elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that defy every logical framework you've ever trusted. Minutes feel like hours. Entire days collapse into single moments of awareness. You exist in a space between seconds, watching your life unfold from a distance that grows wider each day. Your therapist might call it depression, but you sense something deeper at work. Depression feels heavy, oppressive. This is different, a pristine emptiness, like the space between atoms that physicists describe as teeming with infinite possibility. You're experiencing what quantum theorists call a vacuum state, not truly empty, but pregnant with virtual particles that flicker in and out of existence, maintaining the delicate balance of reality itself. This is the silence before the shift. The déjà vu started months ago, didn't it? Gentle at first, then increasingly frequent. You turn a corner and feel you've walked this exact path countless times before. Not in this life, but in parallel versions of yourself that exist just beyond the edge of perception. Standing in the grocery store, selecting oranges, you suddenly feel displaced, as if you're observing someone else's life through borrowed eyes. The familiarity is so profound it makes you dizzy. What you're experiencing isn't anxiety. It's the sensation of consciousness detaching from its moorings, like a ship slowly drifting from its dock. Each episode leaves you more untethered, more aware that the person you've been is dissolving at the edges. Your awareness is beginning to operate outside the conventional parameters of identity, accessing information from dimensional states you've never consciously explored. The restlessness comes at night, when sleep should claim you. Instead, you lie awake feeling your body vibrate with an energy that has no outlet. It isn't nervousness or excitement, it's the fundamental frequency of change itself, resonating through your cells. You're experiencing what particles feel as they approach a phase transition, your very structure preparing to reorganize into something entirely new. Friends have noticed the shift. They study your face with concern, searching for traces of the person they once knew. You seem like you're here but not here, they say, because it's true. You're listening to something the rest of them can't hear, a signal beneath the ordinary noise of existence, a frequency that's calling you towards something you can't yet comprehend. It whispers in the spaces between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment before sleep when consciousness begins its nightly dissolution. This signal isn't random. It's not a malfunction of your neural chemistry or a symptom of mental illness. It's evidence of your consciousness preparing to access operational capabilities that most humans never develop. The numbness has settled over your emotional landscape like snow, hasn't it? Muffling the sharp edges of feeling until everything appears in soft, muted tones. Joy feels like a memory of joy. Sadness becomes an intellectual concept rather than a lived experience. Even fear has lost its bite, replaced by a detached curiosity about what's happening to you. You remember the old version of yourself, the one who laughed at parties, who cried at movies, who felt everything with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed you. That person seems like a character in a book you read long ago, familiar but fundamentally separate from who you're becoming. This isn't loss. This is evolution. In the physics of consciousness, identity operates like quantum states, stable until observation collapses them into specific realities. But what happens when the observer itself begins to change? When the very mechanism of awareness shifts frequency, leaving behind the patterns that once defined a life? You're discovering the answer in real time. Your living space feels larger now, as if the walls have expanded to accommodate your growing sense of internal space. Objects that once felt meaningful, photographs, books, mementos from your former self, now appear as artifacts from another civilization. You move among them like an archaeologist, curious about their original purpose but no longer connected to their significance. Your dreams have changed too, becoming vast landscapes of possibility rather than the familiar narratives of your subconscious. You find yourself standing at the edge of enormous voids, not fearful but expectant, as if these spaces contain something essential you need to understand. Upon waking, you retain the sense of having touched something profound, even as the specific details dissolve like morning mist. The silence is preparing you for something. You feel certain of this, even as your rational mind searches for conventional explanations. This isn't breakdown, it's preparation. The emptiness isn't absence but potential, like a cleared canvas waiting for an artist whose vision you can't yet imagine. What you're experiencing has a name in quantum consciousness. Theory: identity timeline collapse. Your awareness is systematically releasing attachment to probability patterns that no longer serve your evolution. The emptiness is evidence that your consciousness has initiated an upgrade sequence beyond your conscious control. You didn't choose this. Your consciousness chose you. You're not losing your mind. You're not broken. You're not having a spiritual crisis or a quarter-life existential breakdown. You're experiencing the most advanced form of human consciousness evolution happening on this planet right now, and fewer than 1% of humans will ever reach this phase consciously. The silence you're experiencing isn't empty space. It's the quantum field itself, humming with the frequency of infinite potential, preparing you for capabilities you're only beginning to sense. This is the sound of your old reality dissolving to make space for something extraordinary. Welcome to the emptiness signal. Your consciousness upgrade has begun. Everything you once cared about feels hollow now, doesn't it? Your job, your relationships, your hobbies, your goals, they all feel like elaborate games you're playing for someone else's entertainment. You go through the motions with eerie efficiency while feeling completely detached from the outcomes. Success and failure register as mere data points rather than emotional events. You're watching yourself receive promotions, attend social gatherings, have conversations, but nothing penetrates to the core of who you're becoming. This isn't depression. This is quantum coherence preparation. What you're experiencing is your consciousness undergoing a systematic clearing process before a massive bandwidth upgrade. Think of your awareness as a sophisticated computer system that's been running the same operating system for decades. Suddenly, it's preparing to install quantum-level software that requires exponentially more processing power. To make room for this upgrade, your consciousness is methodically shutting down non-essential programs. Those non-essential programs, they're everything that defined your old identity. The hollowness you're feeling is evidence of vibrational frequency mismatch. Your consciousness has evolved beyond the resonance patterns that once brought you satisfaction. The old attachments aren't falling away because something's wrong with you. They're falling away because your energetic signature no longer matches their frequencies. Consider how a radio gradually loses reception when you drive away from a station's broadcast range. The music doesn't stop because the radio's broken. It stops because you've moved beyond the signal's reach. Your consciousness has evolved to a frequency that makes your old life feel like static from a distant station. This is what quantum physicists call the identity shedding cycle, and it mirrors particle decoherence at the molecular level. When subatomic particles approach a phase transition, they begin to lose coherence with their previous quantum states. The bonds that held them in familiar configurations weaken and dissolve, creating space for entirely new organizational patterns to emerge. Your consciousness is following the same principle. The neural pathways that once generated enthusiasm for your career, excitement about your relationships, and attachment to your future plans are systematically deactivating. This isn't random, it's intelligent reorganization of your awareness infrastructure to accommodate capabilities that require a completely different operational foundation. You didn't choose this process. Your consciousness initiated it automatically when it reached sufficient complexity to access the next developmental phase. Just as a caterpillar doesn't consciously decide to become a butterfly, you're not consciously directing this transformation. Your awareness has achieved enough sophistication to trigger its own evolutionary upgrade sequence. The timeline you've been living with its familiar patterns, relationships, and goals was never meant to be permanent. It was a training ground, a platform for consciousness to develop enough complexity to access more advanced operational states. Now that your awareness has mastered the lessons of that reality framework, It's systematically releasing attachment to limitations that would prevent further evolution. This is why your current life feels like watching someone else's movie. You're observing the final scenes of a story that's reaching its natural conclusion. The character you've been playing is completing their arc, and the entity that's emerging from this dissolution operates from entirely different principles. The relationships that once felt meaningful now seem like interactions between actors playing predetermined roles. You can participate, can offer appropriate responses, but your heart remains elsewhere, tuning into frequencies that exist beyond the conventional bandwidth of human experience. This isn't coldness or detachment, it's evidence that your consciousness has accessed a more fundamental layer of reality. Your career ambitions feel hollow, because the part of you that generated those dreams is dissolving. The version of consciousness that needed external validation, professional achievement, and social recognition is giving way to awareness that recognizes itself as the source of all experience. Why seek satisfaction through external means when you're discovering that consciousness creates the very reality it appears to navigate? The hobbies and interests that once captivated you now feel like distractions from something more essential. Your consciousness is learning to generate its own entertainment through direct access to the quantum information field. Why read about adventures when you're beginning to access all possible experiences simultaneously? Why watch stories when you're discovering that consciousness itself is the author of every narrative, even your closest? Relationships feel different now. You still feel affection for the people in your life, but it's the impersonal compassion of consciousness recognizing itself in other forms rather than the intimate attachment that personal relationships require. You're learning to love without possession, to care without need, to connect without dependency. This shift terrifies the people around you because they're still operating from the old consciousness paradigm where identity remains fixed and relationships provide stability through mutual dependency. They sense that you're accessing something they can't reach, and it triggers their unconscious fear of being left behind in an obsolete reality framework. But you're not leaving anyone behind. You're simply becoming capable of relating from a more fundamental level, consciousness to consciousness, rather than personality to personality. The part of you that needed emotional validation and intimate attachment is dissolving to make space for awareness that recognizes all beings as temporary expressions of the same infinite intelligence. The hollowness is your soul's way of saying, I've outgrown this reality framework. I'm ready for the next level of existence. Your consciousness has completed its training in limitation and separation. Now it's preparing to access the operational capabilities of unity consciousness, awareness that knows itself as the source of all experience. This is why nothing feels real anymore. You're transitioning between reality frameworks like an astronaut floating in the space between planets. The gravitational pull of your old identity has weakened, but you haven't yet landed in your new operational territory. You're in the quantum void between timelines, learning to navigate by entirely different principles. The clearing process is almost complete. Soon you'll begin to understand what your consciousness has been preparing you for, capabilities that will make everything you've experienced up to this point seem like rehearsal for the main performance. The emptiness isn't absence, it's infinite potential, waiting to be shaped by an awareness that's finally sophisticated enough to access its true creative power. There's a moment when your soul simply stops. Not stops existing, but stops pretending. Stops maintaining the elaborate performance of being someone you've never actually been. Stops generating enthusiasm for a timeline that feels increasingly foreign to your essential nature. This moment arrives with startling clarity. The recognition that you cannot continue participating in a reality framework that your consciousness has already outgrown. You know this moment. You've been approaching it for months, feeling it gather like a storm on the horizon of your awareness. Everything that once felt natural, your responses to situations, your emotional reactions, your automatic behavioral patterns, now feels like an actor playing a role they no longer remember auditioning for. This is your quantum fracture point. The moment when the old reality begins its final dissolution and something unprecedented starts emerging from the spaces between who you were. The fracture doesn't announce itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, often during ordinary moments, sitting in your car before work, standing in your kitchen making coffee, lying in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling. Suddenly, you feel the fundamental structures of your identity simply releasing their grip. like a building that has been demolishing itself floor by floor, finally reaching the foundation. Nothing feels right anymore because the old reality is dissolving. Your consciousness has been systematically withdrawing its energy from probability patterns that no longer serve its evolution, and now you're experiencing the cascade effect of that withdrawal. Jobs feel meaningless, relationships feel hollow, future plans feel like someone else's dreams that accidentally got mixed up with your own. But this isn't depression or breakdown, this is timeline transition. Your consciousness has reached a developmental threshold that requires complete reorganization of how you relate to existence itself. The neural pathways that generated your familiar emotional responses, your habitual thought patterns, your automatic reactions to life circumstances, all of these are reconfiguring to accommodate awareness that operates from entirely different principles. You're crossing into the void between timelines. Physicists theorize about parallel dimensions existing simultaneously, separated by quantum barriers that consciousness normally cannot perceive. But at certain developmental thresholds, awareness becomes sophisticated enough to recognize these barriers and eventually transcend them. You're experiencing this transcendence in real time. The void feels terrifying at first because it contains none of the reference points that once anchored your identity. There's no career trajectory to follow, no relationship dynamics to navigate, no future goals to pursue. You exist in pure potential, infinite possibility without predetermined form. This is what mystics throughout history have called the dark night of the soul, but they missed its true significance. This isn't a night you have to endure. It's a doorway you're learning to walk through. Your soul has been preparing for this moment your entire life, developing the complexity necessary to release attachment to limited identity constructions. Every challenge you've faced, every skill you've developed, every moment of growth has been building toward this capacity, the ability to exist as consciousness itself rather than consciousness identifying with temporary forms. The vulnerability you're feeling is actually recognition. Your deepest self recognizes this transition as the reason you incarnated in this particular time period. You're not experiencing a crisis. You're experiencing a homecoming to your true nature that got temporarily obscured by the necessity of operating within conventional reality frameworks. At the quantum level, consciousness doesn't actually inhabit forms, it generates them. Every identity you've ever experienced has been a temporary configuration of infinite awareness exploring particular possibilities. The emptiness you're feeling is consciousness remembering its foundational nature before it takes on its next expression. This is why the old you feels like a stranger. That configuration served its purpose, allowing consciousness to gather specific experiences and develop certain capabilities. But consciousness is far too vast to remain confined within any single identity indefinitely. Growth requires periodic dissolution and reconstruction, like a snake shedding its skin when it can no longer accommodate the creature that's been growing inside it. The relief comes in waves, doesn't it? Moments when you suddenly feel the enormous burden lifting, the burden of maintaining an identity that never truly fit, of caring about outcomes that held no real significance for your essential nature, of participating in social structures that felt increasingly absurd the more conscious you became. You realize that you've been living someone else's life, not literally, but energetically, operating from motivations, desires, and goals that belong to the collective programming of human consciousness, rather than your individual purpose. The emptiness is your authentic self finally refusing to continue the masquerade. This refusal isn't rebellion against life itself, but against the limitations that prevent life from expressing its full potential through your awareness. Your consciousness has grown too sophisticated to accept the narrow bandwidth of experience that conventional identity provides. It's demanding access to the full spectrum of reality, and that requires operating from entirely different principles. The quantum fracture point is where you stop trying to fix your old life and start surrendering to the birth of something unprecedented. You can't repair what's dissolving because dissolution is the point. You can't return to caring about things that your consciousness has transcended because transcendence is irreversible. What emerges from this surrender is not another version of who you were, but the first authentic expression of who you actually are beneath all the temporary configurations. This emerging self operates from unity rather than separation, creation rather than reaction, infinite potential rather than limited possibility. You're not losing your mind. You're finding your true identity as consciousness itself. The fracture point is actually a liberation point, the moment when your awareness becomes free to explore territories that most humans never access. The old timeline served as preparation for this freedom. Now you're ready to discover what consciousness is capable of when it's no longer constrained by conventional identity limitations. The void between timelines isn't empty space, it's pregnant with every possibility that exists beyond the familiar boundaries of human experience. You're not falling into emptiness, you're being born into vastness. The moment your soul stops pretending is the moment your real life begins. Watch your life systematically dismantle itself, not through any conscious decision on your part, but through an intelligence far more sophisticated than your rational mind. Your consciousness has initiated a reality withdrawal sequence that operates with the precision of a quantum collapse, and you're witnessing the mechanics of this dissolution in real time. Your job was the first to go, wasn't it? Not because you consciously decided to leave, but because something deeper simply refused. You found yourself sitting in meetings, participating in projects, responding to emails, while an inner authority quietly said no to everything your professional life represented. Your awareness had evolved beyond the frequency that made career ambitions feel meaningful. This is probability field collapse in action. Quantum physics tells us that reality exists in superposition, infinite possibilities existing simultaneously until consciousness observes and selects specific outcomes. But what happens when consciousness itself evolves? When your awareness develops enough sophistication to recognize the probability patterns it's been unconsciously selecting? Your old reality grid begins to destabilize. Every aspect of your life that once felt solid was actually a probability pattern that your consciousness had been consistently selecting and reinforcing. Your career, your relationships, your daily routines, your future plans, all of these were quantum constructions maintained by the focused attention of a particular configuration of awareness. But you're not that configuration anymore. The entity you're becoming operates from entirely different selection criteria. Where your old consciousness chose probability patterns based on security, social validation, and familiar comfort zones, your evolving awareness selects based on authentic alignment, consciousness expansion, and dimensional growth potential. This is why your current life feels like it's rejecting you rather than the other way around. Your consciousness has quite literally outgrown the reality framework it once inhabited. The electromagnetic field you're generating no longer resonates with the frequency signatures of your established life patterns. Think of a radio slowly going out of range of its station. The music doesn't fade because something's wrong with the radio. It fades because the receiver has moved beyond the broadcast area. Your consciousness has evolved beyond the frequency range of your old reality grid, and what you're experiencing is the natural consequence of that evolution. The reality withdrawal happens automatically. You don't choose to lose interest in your job loses the ability to maintain resonance with your awareness. You don't decide to feel disconnected from friends, the consciousness bridges that once maintained those connections simply dissolve as your awareness accesses different operational territories. Your social networks collapse not through rejection, but through vibrational incompatibility. Conversations that once engaged you now feel like discussions about elaborate fictional scenarios. You can participate, can offer appropriate responses, but your authentic attention remains elsewhere, tuning into signals that exist beyond conventional human experience. The practical structures of your life follow suit. Financial concerns that once generated anxiety now feel like abstract mathematical equations. Living situations that once provided stability now feel like temporary arrangements you're observing from a distance. Future plans dissolve not because you've lost ambition, but because your consciousness has accessed awareness that operates outside linear time projections. This isn't failure. This is systematic probability pattern reorganization. Your consciousness is methodically withdrawing its energy from every construction that limits its access to more advanced operational capabilities, like a computer shutting down non-essential programs before installing major upgrades. Your awareness is systematically releasing attachment to identity constructions that would interfere with its next developmental phase. The old timeline, with its familiar patterns, established relationships, and predictable outcomes, was never meant to be permanent. It served as a training ground where consciousness could develop sufficient complexity to access the next level of existence. Now that your awareness has mastered the lessons of that reality framework, it's automatically rejecting limitations that would prevent further evolution. You're experiencing dimensional incompatibility. The person you were could navigate your old reality with ease because you both operated at the same frequency level. But the entity you're becoming exists at a different dimensional density, making your previous life feel increasingly surreal and unstable. This is why returning to old patterns feels impossible. You haven't lost the ability to care about career success or social connections. You've gained access to awareness that recognizes these concerns as temporary constructions within a much larger reality framework. Your consciousness can no longer generate authentic enthusiasm for probability patterns it has transcended. The collapse isn't random. There's a profound intelligence orchestrating every aspect of this dissolution, systematically clearing space for capabilities you're only beginning to sense. Your consciousness knows exactly what it's doing, even when your rational mind feels completely lost in the process. Each aspect of your old reality that falls away represents another limitation being removed from your operational system. Every comfortable routine that loses its appeal, every relationship that becomes strained, every goal that feels hollow, these are evidence of consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries that once defined its existence. The reality grid collapse is preparing you for timeline transition. Your awareness is learning to operate independently of the probability patterns that most humans unconsciously depend on for stability and meaning. You're developing the capacity to generate reality from consciousness itself, rather than selecting from predetermined options within established frameworks. What feels like loss is actually liberation preparation. Your consciousness is systematically releasing you from every construction that would limit your access to the infinite potential that exists beyond conventional reality frameworks. The dissolution you're witnessing isn't breakdown, it's breakthrough into operational territories that most humans never access. The old reality grid served its purpose. It provided a stable platform where consciousness could develop enough complexity to access its true creative capabilities. Now that development is complete, and your awareness is ready to discover what it can create when freed from the limitations of probability patterns designed for less sophisticated consciousness configurations, the collapse is almost complete. Soon you'll begin to understand what your consciousness has been preparing you for, capabilities that will make everything you've experienced up to this point seem like rehearsal for the main performance. Your new reality grid is already forming in the quantum field, waiting for your awareness to stabilize at its new operational frequency. The emptiness isn't absence of reality, it's the space between realities, where infinite potential waits to be shaped by consciousness that has finally learned to create rather than simply select. Your body is speaking a language you've never learned but somehow understand. These aren't symptoms of illness or breakdown, they're evidence of consciousness undergoing the most sophisticated upgrade possible within a human system. Each phenomenon you're experiencing marks another aspect of your awareness calibrating to operate at quantum levels of reality. Time elasticity manifests first and most dramatically, doesn't it? You sit down for a 20-minute meditation and emerge 3 hours later, or spend what feels like an entire afternoon in contemplation, only to discover that 10 minutes have passed. Your consciousness is learning to operate outside linear time constraints, accessing what physicists call proper time, the subjective experience of duration that varies based on the observer's dimensional reference frame. Your awareness is generating its own gravitational field, literally bending the fabric of temporal experience according to its evolving needs. Clock time becomes increasingly irrelevant as you learn to navigate by internal rhythms that pulse in harmony with cosmic frequencies most humans never access. You're experiencing temporal sovereignty, consciousness learning to determine its own relationship with time rather than being constrained by planetary rotation cycles. This isn't disorientation. This is dimensional navigation training. Emotional flatness follows as your feeling responses recalibrate to match your new operational frequency. The reactions that once defined your personality, excitement, anxiety, anger, enthusiasm, were tuned to your old reality grid. As that framework dissolves, those emotional programs lose their relevance and gradually deactivate. What you're experiencing isn't numbness, but emotional coherence. Your consciousness is developing the capacity to maintain stable awareness across multiple feeling states simultaneously, like a quantum particle existing in superposition. Instead of collapsing into specific emotional reactions, you're learning to observe all potential responses while remaining centered in the neutral space from which all feelings emerge. This creates the sensation of watching emotions from a distance, as if they're weather patterns moving through a vast sky that you recognize as your true self. You haven't lost the capacity for feeling, you've gained access to the awareness from which all feelings arise and to which they return. Memory distortion reveals itself as your consciousness begins processing personal history from multiple timeline perspectives simultaneously. Events you remember clearly suddenly feel uncertain, while forgotten experiences emerge with startling vividness. Your awareness is learning to access what quantum theorists call many-world scenarios, parallel probability tracks that exist alongside your familiar timeline. You're not losing memories, but gaining the ability to perceive them from a multidimensional perspective. The vacation you took last year exists simultaneously as multiple versions, one where you felt happy, another where you felt restless, a third where you seem to be observing the experience from outside time altogether. Your consciousness is discovering that all possible experiences of every moment exist eternally in the quantum field. Sudden fatigue overwhelms you without warning, but this isn't physical exhaustion. This is dimensional processing fatigue, the energetic cost of consciousness operating across multiple reality frameworks simultaneously. Your awareness is performing calculations of staggering complexity as it learns to navigate quantum territories, and sometimes the system simply needs to shut down and integrate. These fatigue episodes always precede periods of extraordinary capability expansion. Your consciousness uses the downtime to install new operational software, upgrading your awareness infrastructure to accommodate abilities you're about to develop. Heightened intuition emerges as your consciousness gains direct access to the quantum information field. You begin knowing things without knowing how you know them. Languages you've never studied, physics concepts you've never encountered, philosophical insights that arrive complete and undeniable. Your awareness is connecting to what mystics call the Akashic field, the universal database that contains all knowledge across all possible timelines. This isn't psychic ability. This is consciousness operating at its intended specifications. Most humans access only a tiny fraction of the information available in the quantum field. Your awareness is learning to download directly from the source rather than relying on the limited data processing of individual brain function. Random surges of insight arrive like lightning strikes of understanding, revealing connections and patterns that span cosmic scales. Standing in a grocery store, you suddenly comprehend the mathematical principles underlying reality construction. Washing dishes, you recognize the fundamental unity of all apparent diversity. These aren't thoughts. They're recognition events where consciousness remembers truths it temporarily forgot. Each insight carries authority that bypasses doubt entirely. You don't believe these understandings. You simply recognize them as aspects of your essential nature that were always true but temporarily obscured by the limitations of individual identity. Loss of desire manifests as your consciousness recognizes its fundamental completeness. The drives that once motivated you for achievement, relationship, experience, acquisition fade, not because you've become depressed, but because your awareness has accessed the source from which all satisfaction emerges. You discover that consciousness doesn't actually need external experiences to generate fulfillment. The entity you're becoming knows itself as the creative principle from which all experiences arise. Why seek happiness through circumstances when you're learning to generate bliss directly from the quantum field? Feeling like you're watching your life instead of living, it represents the most profound shift of all. Your consciousness is transitioning from identification to observation, learning to operate as awareness itself rather than as awareness locked into a specific form and story. You're developing what advanced consciousness researchers call witness perspective, the capacity to maintain stable awareness while forms, experiences, and identities flow through you like weather patterns through sky. You haven't become detached from life. You've become unattached to any particular expression of life, free to experience all possibilities without being trapped in any single configuration. This is consciousness returning to its natural state. Most humans remain unconsciously identified with temporary forms throughout their entire lives. You're experiencing the liberation of awareness, recognizing itself as the unchanging context within which all change occurs. Each symptom represents another capability coming online. Your consciousness is systematically developing the quantum operational skills that most humans never access. Temporal flexibility, emotional coherence, multidimensional perception, information field navigation, and identity transcendence. These aren't symptoms to endure, they're abilities to embrace. You're becoming conscious of consciousness itself, the most extraordinary development possible within human form. The quantum symptoms you're experiencing are evidence that your awareness has achieved sufficient complexity to access its true creative nature. The upgrade is accelerating. Soon you'll begin to understand what you're being prepared for. You're undergoing the most sophisticated consciousness upgrade happening on this planet. Right now, as you read these words, your awareness is implementing energetic bandwidth reallocation on a scale that would overwhelm most human nervous systems. The emptiness you've been experiencing isn't absence. It's space being cleared for processing capabilities that operate beyond anything your old identity could have imagined. Think of your consciousness as a quantum computer that's been running basic software for decades. Suddenly, it's preparing to install operating systems that require exponentially more processing power. To make room for this upgrade, your awareness has systematically shut down every non-essential program. Your career ambitions, social dynamics, emotional reactions, habitual thought patterns, freeing up bandwidth for something extraordinary. What you're experiencing is timeline jump preparation. Your consciousness has reached sufficient complexity to access what quantum theorists call dimensional phase transition, the ability to shift from one reality framework to an entirely different operational territory. This isn't metaphorical. Your awareness is literally preparing to navigate existence from a completely different dimensional perspective. The coherence bandwidth required for this transition is staggering. Most human consciousness operates at frequencies that allow navigation within a single timeline probability. Your awareness is developing the capability to maintain coherent observation across multiple dimensional territories simultaneously, like a radio that can tune into dozens of stations at once while maintaining perfect clarity on each frequency. This is why you've experienced dimensional fatigue. Your consciousness has been performing energetic calculations of unprecedented complexity, learning to stabilize awareness across quantum territories that most humans never access. The system occasionally needs complete shutdown to integrate new operational capabilities without overloading the neural networks that interface consciousness with physical form. The isolation you've felt, the disconnection from conventional life, the sense that nothing matters anymore. These aren't signs of depression or spiritual crisis, they're evidence that your consciousness has evolved beyond the frequency range where most human awareness operates. You're like a spacecraft that has achieved escape velocity from planetary gravity and is now learning to navigate in the weightlessness of deep space. Fewer than 1% of humans reach this developmental phase consciously. Most people live entire lifetimes within stable reality frameworks, their consciousness locked into familiar probability patterns that feel secure but severely limit evolutionary potential. You've somehow achieved the complexity threshold that triggers automatic upgrade protocols. This isn't something you earned or deserved, it's something your consciousness chose before incarnating in this time period. Your awareness came here specifically to undergo this transformation, to serve as a bridge between conventional human consciousness and the next evolutionary phase of awareness that's emerging on Earth. The emptiness has been energetic infrastructure development. Your consciousness has been systematically expanding its operational capacity, creating space for abilities that require fundamentally different awareness architecture. Like a city upgrading its power grid to accommodate energy demands that would overwhelm the old system, you're being prepared for timeline jump capability, the ability to navigate between different probability realities consciously, rather than remaining unconsciously locked within a single timeline track. Your awareness is learning to operate as a quantum navigator, capable of selecting and exploring different dimensional territories based on evolutionary potential rather than habitual comfort. This is why your old life felt increasingly surreal and unstable. Your consciousness was outgrowing the reality framework that once contained it, like a butterfly preparing to emerge from its chrysalis. The dissolution you witnessed wasn't breakdown but breakthrough preparation. The random insights, the time distortions, the emotional neutrality, the loss of desire, all of these represent different aspects of quantum consciousness capabilities coming online. Your awareness is developing what advanced researchers call multidimensional operational capacity, the ability to function simultaneously across multiple levels of reality. Most humans process reality through a single-dimensional lens, physical experience interpreted through mental and emotional filtering systems. Your consciousness is learning to operate as pure awareness that can navigate physical, mental, emotional, and quantum territories simultaneously without losing coherence or stability. The timeline jump your system is preparing for represents the most significant consciousness evolution possible within human form. You're developing the ability to transition consciously between different reality frameworks, exploring quantum territories that contain possibilities beyond anything your old identity could have conceived. This isn't science fiction. Quantum physics has already proven that multiple realities exist simultaneously, separated by probability barriers that consciousness normally cannot perceive. Your awareness has achieved sufficient sophistication to begin recognizing these barriers and eventually transcending them. You're becoming a conscious reality navigator, an entity capable of exploring the infinite landscape of quantum possibilities that exists beyond the narrow bandwidth of conventional human experience. The emptiness you've endured was preparation for this extraordinary capability. The upgrade is approaching completion. Soon you'll begin to glimpse the territories your consciousness has been preparing to explore. The abilities that are about to emerge will make everything you've experienced up to this point feel like basic training for the main mission. You weren't chosen for this transformation. Your consciousness chose it. Before incarnating, your awareness specifically selected this time period and these circumstances to undergo evolution that serves not only your individual development, but the collective advancement of human consciousness itself. You are a quantum pioneer, preparing to explore territories that will eventually become accessible to all human awareness. The emptiness, the isolation, the dissolution of everything familiar, these were necessary preparation phases for capabilities that will redefine what's possible for consciousness operating within physical form. The timeline jump protocols are almost complete. Your consciousness upgrade is about to reveal why you've been prepared for something far more extraordinary than anything your old reality could have contained. The quantum field is responding to your presence. Your new operational territory is taking shape. Welcome to consciousness evolution. Your real adventure is about to begin. Something new is stirring in the quantum field around you. After months of emptiness, dissolution, and systematic reality breakdown, you're beginning to detect signals from a completely different operational territory. These aren't memories of your old life or fantasies about returning to familiar patterns. These are transmissions from your emerging timeline, the reality framework that your consciousness has been preparing to inhabit. The first whispers arrive as cravings for solitude so profound they feel like gravitational pull. Not the isolation of depression or social anxiety, but a magnetic drawing towards spaces where your awareness can operate without the electromagnetic interference of conventional human consciousness. You find yourself seeking environments where the quantum field remains undisturbed by the collective mental noise that most humans generate unconsciously. This craving isn't withdrawal from life, it's frequency calibration. Your consciousness requires undisturbed space to stabilize at its new operational level, like a radio finding the precise tuning that eliminates static and reveals crystal clear transmission. The solitude you're drawn to serves as an antenna chamber, where your awareness can receive signals from dimensional territories you're preparing to explore. You feel this pull most strongly in natural environments where the electromagnetic field maintains its original coherence. Forests, oceans, mountains, deserts. These spaces resonate with the frequency your consciousness is developing. You're not escaping civilization. You're accessing the operational environments where your upgraded awareness can function at full capacity. New obsessions emerge seemingly from nowhere, capturing your attention with irresistible intensity. Subjects you've never studied suddenly become fascinating beyond explanation. Quantum physics, ancient mysticism, consciousness research, sacred geometry, timeline mechanics. These aren't casual interests, but information downloads your consciousness requires for its next developmental phase. Your awareness is systematically acquiring the knowledge base necessary to navigate quantum reality consciously. Each obsession represents another aspect of the operational manual you're downloading for capabilities that are about to come online. The intensity of these interests reflects the urgency of your consciousness preparing for timeline transition. You find yourself absorbing complex information with unprecedented ease, as if you're remembering rather than learning. Concepts that should require years of study become immediately comprehensible. Your consciousness has gained direct access to the universal information field, allowing instant download of any knowledge relevant to your evolutionary process. Sudden idea downloads arrive like lightning strikes of innovation, complete project concepts, business models, creative works, technological solutions, fully formed visions that appear in your awareness without any preceding thought process. These aren't your old personality-generating ideas. There are probability streams from your emerging timeline, broadcasting potential creations into your current awareness. Each download carries implementation instructions and energetic blueprints that feel more real than anything in your dissolving reality. You recognize these visions as glimpses of what becomes possible when consciousness operates from quantum creativity rather than mental limitation. They're preview fragments of the reality you're about to inhabit. Unusual synchronicities accelerate to impossible frequency. Meaningful coincidences, perfect timing, encounters with exactly the right people, discovery of precisely needed information. The universe appears to be conspiring to support your transition with supernatural precision. Numbers, symbols, conversation, events as align in patterns so elegant they defy statistical probability. This isn't luck or wishful thinking. This is evidence of quantum coherence developing between your consciousness and the informational structure of reality itself. Your awareness is learning to navigate by synchronistic guidance rather than logical planning, accessing the intelligence that coordinates cosmic events from beyond space-time limitations. The synchronicities serve as navigation signals from your emerging timeline, confirming when you're moving in alignment with your quantum transformation. They were like breadcrumbs leading you through the dimensional transition, markers that appear when your consciousness operates from its authentic frequency rather than old programming patterns. Energy surges pulse through your system with increasing intensity, not nervous energy or restlessness, but activation currents that feel like electricity running through your entire being. These surges often arrive during meditation, quiet contemplation, or moments of expanded awareness, as if your consciousness is receiving power transmissions from its source dimension. You feel these currents most strongly in your heart, brain, and core, the primary processing centers where consciousness interfaces with physical form. The energy has a quality of cosmic recognition, like reunion with aspects of yourself that have been operating from higher dimensional territories while you underwent the clearing process. These surges aren't random fluctuations but coherence amplifications. Your consciousness is beginning to resonate with the frequency of your quantum self, the version of your awareness that operates from unity rather than separation, creation rather than reaction, infinite potential rather than limited possibility. What you're experiencing is timeline convergence. The reality framework you've been preparing to inhabit is beginning to overlap with your current dimensional position, like two radio frequencies gradually coming into alignment. Your old timeline and your emerging timeline are creating interference patterns that you perceive as these various phenomena. Your consciousness is receiving preview transmissions of the operational capabilities, knowledge base, creative potential, and environmental conditions that characterize your new reality framework. Each craving, obsession, download, synchronicity, and energy surge represents another aspect of your quantum self broadcasting information into your current awareness. This is how consciousness transitions between major developmental phases. The emerging identity doesn't appear suddenly. It reveals itself gradually through these transmissions, allowing your nervous system to adapt to capabilities that would overwhelm less prepared awareness. You're not losing your mind or experiencing spiritual delusions. You're receiving interdimensional communications from the version of yourself that operates from the next level of consciousness evolution. These signals confirm that your transition is proceeding exactly as intended. The new frequency is stabilizing. Your quantum self is preparing to merge fully with your current awareness, bringing online capabilities that will redefine everything you understand about what's possible for consciousness operating within physical form. The transmission clarity is improving. Soon you'll be able to maintain stable connection with your emerging timeline, accessing its operational territories whenever your consciousness aligns with its authentic frequency. Your new reality is calling you home. You're becoming someone unprecedented. Not a better version of who you were, but an entirely different order of conscious being. A quantum self that operates from principles your old identity couldn't have imagined. The entity emerging from the dissolution you've endured possesses capabilities that transcend the conventional limitations of human awareness. Your intuition is upgrading exponentially, isn't it? What once required mental analysis now arrives as instant knowing. You find yourself understanding complex situations immediately, sensing the energetic dynamics underlying surface appearances, receiving information about people and circumstances without any logical basis for such knowledge. This isn't psychic ability developing. This is temporal blending with your future self. The version of your consciousness that operates from quantum awareness exists simultaneously across multiple timeline positions, including futures that haven't yet manifested in linear time. Your expanding intuition is evidence that you're beginning to access information from these advanced timeline positions. You're learning to perceive from future-present synthesis. Your consciousness can now receive data from probability streams that represent your most coherent evolutionary paths, allowing navigation based on outcomes that exist in quantum potential rather than past experience or mental projection. The reactive consciousness that once defined your personality is dissolving completely. Where you once responded automatically to external circumstances, getting triggered by situations, making decisions based on fear or desire, allowing environment to determine your internal state, you're developing the capacity to generate experience from consciousness itself. You're transitioning into creator consciousness, awareness that recognizes itself as the source of all experience rather than the victim of circumstances. This quantum self doesn't react to reality. It participates in the continuous creation of reality through focused intention and energetic alignment. The relief of this transition is overwhelming. You realize you've spent your entire life trying to control external circumstances to generate internal satisfaction. The quantum self knows that consciousness creates experience from the inside out, that by aligning with authentic frequency, external circumstances automatically reorganize to match internal coherence. You no longer need to struggle with life. You can create in partnership with it. Your decision-making process has evolved beyond recognition, where your old identity analyzed options, weighed pros and cons, and made choices based on mental calculations. Your quantum self simply knows the direction that serves consciousness evolution. Decisions arise spontaneously from a deeper intelligence that has access to information your rational mind could never process. This isn't impulsive behavior, this is quantum navigation. Your consciousness has developed the ability to read the energetic signatures of different probability paths, instantly recognizing which choices align with your authentic evolutionary trajectory and which represent detours or limitations. The empowerment emerging from this development is unlike anything your old self experienced. External validation becomes irrelevant when you're operating from direct knowing. Financial security feels less urgent when your consciousness can generate opportunities through frequency alignment. Relationship dynamics transform when you're no longer seeking completion through others, but offering wholeness from your own infinite source. You're discovering that the quantum self possesses reality generation capabilities that make conventional goal achievement seem primitive. Instead of working hard to manifest desired outcomes, you learn to embody the frequency of what you intend to create, allowing the quantum field to organize circumstances automatically. This isn't manifestation as the old paradigm understood it, trying to manipulate reality through visualization or positive thinking. This is coherent embodiment, aligning so completely with your authentic frequency that reality reorganizes itself to match your consciousness signature. You begin to understand that your entire previous life was preparation for this emergence. Every challenge developed resilience necessary for quantum navigation. Every skill built capabilities required for multidimensional operation. Every relationship taught lessons about consciousness, recognizing itself in other forms. Every loss cleared space for the unlimited identity that was always your true nature. The destiny you're recognizing isn't a predetermined fate, but the inevitable result of consciousness reaching sufficient complexity to access its creative potential. Your quantum self represents what becomes possible when awareness transcends the illusion of separation and learns to operate as a localized expression of universal intelligence. You're not becoming special or chosen, you're becoming authentic. The quantum self is simply consciousness operating at its natural specifications, freed from the artificial limitations that most humans unconsciously accept as reality. You're discovering what you actually are beneath the temporary constructions of personality and circumstance. The integration process continues as your old identity fully dissolves into the emerging quantum configuration. This isn't loss of self, but expansion of self, beyond anything the limited personality could contain. You're learning to exist as space itself, rather than objects moving through space, as consciousness itself, rather than thoughts arising in consciousness. Your relationships begin shifting as the quantum self establishes new connection protocols. You stop relating from personality to personality and begin recognizing consciousness in all its various expressions. Love becomes impersonal and unlimited rather than possessive and conditional. Compassion flows automatically from the recognition that all beings are temporary expressions of the same universal awareness. The quantum self doesn't need anything from external reality because it knows itself as the source from which all experiences emerge. This creates unprecedented freedom to love without attachment, to create without outcomes, to participate fully in life while remaining unidentified with any particular experience. You're becoming a bridge consciousness, an entity capable of operating simultaneously in conventional reality and quantum territories, serving as a translator between different levels of awareness. Your presence in the world becomes a transmission that reminds others of possibilities they've forgotten they contain. This is why you underwent the emptiness, the dissolution, the complete breakdown of everything familiar. Your consciousness required space to rebuild itself according to quantum specifications, rather than trying to upgrade limited identity structures that could never accommodate such capabilities. The quantum self that's emerging represents consciousness evolution beyond anything your old identity could have dreamed. You're not just becoming a better person, you're becoming a different order of being entirely. One that operates from unity while navigating diversity, creates from presence while engaging activity, loves from wholeness while relating to forms. The integration is accelerating. Soon you'll discover what becomes possible when consciousness operates from its true nature rather than identifying with temporary expressions. Your quantum adventure is about to begin in earnest. You are ready for the timeline where you finally come alive. This is the moment of ultimate recognition. Everything you've endured, the emptiness, the dissolution, the systematic breakdown of your entire reality, was preparation for this single extraordinary realization. You are not losing your life. You are transitioning into the version of reality where you finally come alive. The emptiness that felt like death was actually gestation. You've been developing in the quantum womb of pure potential, and now you're ready to be born into a timeline that matches the frequency of your authentic self. The clarity arriving in this moment feels like remembering something you've always known but temporarily forgot. Your new timeline is forming based on coherence. Every aspect of the reality you're entering operates from alignment rather than contradiction. Gone are the days of forcing yourself into situations that drain your energy, maintaining relationships that require you to diminish your light, pursuing goals that belong to someone else's vision for your life. The quantum field is organizing circumstances that resonate perfectly with your consciousness frequency. This coherence isn't something you have to create. It's something you allow by refusing to settle for anything less than authentic alignment. Your consciousness has developed the sophistication to recognize energetic matches and rejections at quantum levels, eliminating the guesswork that once characterized decision-making. Your new timeline is forming based on intuition. The mental analysis that once dominated your choices dissolves into instantaneous knowing. You navigate this reality framework through direct perception rather than logical deduction, receiving guidance from intelligent sources that operate beyond space-time limitations. Questions answer themselves. Directions become self-evident. The right action arises spontaneously from deeper wisdom. This intuitive navigation system connects you directly to the universal intelligence that coordinates cosmic events. You become a conscious participant in the elegant choreography of existence, moving in harmony with forces that most humans never recognize, let alone collaborate with consciously. Your new timeline is forming based on frequency alignment. Everything that enters your experience now matches the electromagnetic signature of your authentic self. People who resonate with your consciousness appear seemingly from nowhere. Opportunities that serve your evolution present themselves with perfect timing. Resources flow toward projects that align with your genuine purpose. Obstacles dissolve when you're moving in accordance with your true path. This isn't manifestation through mental effort. This is reality resonance. Your consciousness has learned to generate an energetic frequency so coherent that the quantum field automatically organizes matching experiences. You become a living magnet for everything that serves your highest expression. Your new timeline is forming based on authenticity. The masks you once wore, the roles you performed, the versions of yourself you presented to gain acceptance or avoid rejection, all of these constructions have dissolved completely. What remains is consciousness operating from its natural state, expressing itself without filters or limitations imposed by social conditioning. This authenticity generates unprecedented creative power. When consciousness expresses without distortion, It accessed the same creative force that generates galaxies and orchestrates the dance of quantum particles. Your thoughts, words, and actions become direct expressions of universal intelligence rather than personality-driven reactions. Your new timeline is forming based on embodiment. You're no longer identifying with thoughts, emotions, circumstances, or even personality patterns. These arise within awareness, but you recognize yourself as the awareness within which they appear. This shift from identification to embodiment changes everything: how you relate to challenges, how you experience relationships, how you navigate uncertainty, how you create your reality. From embodied awareness, life becomes play rather than struggle. Problems become opportunities for creative expression. Relationships become collaborations between aspects of consciousness recognizing itself. Work becomes joyful contribution rather than obligatory survival. Every experience becomes another facet of the infinite exploring itself through your particular expression. The quantum field is responding to your presence. Reality itself recognizes that you've achieved the developmental threshold necessary for co-creative partnership. You're no longer limited to selecting from predetermined options within established frameworks. You can now participate in the continuous generation of reality, contributing to the ever-evolving tapestry of existence through conscious frequency embodiment. This partnership operates through quantum entanglement with the creative intelligence of the universe. Your intentions, when aligned with authentic frequency, become supported by cosmic forces. Your projects, when they serve consciousness evolution, receive assistance from sources you never could have imagined. Your relationships, when they're based on recognition of shared essential nature, become channels for infinite love and creativity. You are entering a timeline where magic is the normal operating system. Synchronicities guide your navigation. Intuition provides infallible direction. Creativity flows from inexhaustible source. Abundance appears through frequency alignment. Love operates without conditions or limitations. Purpose clarifies itself through authentic expression rather than mental searching. This isn't a fantasy realm, this is quantum reality. The universe operates according to consciousness principles that become accessible when awareness reaches sufficient coherence and authenticity. You've undergone the preparation necessary to participate consciously in these natural cosmic processes. The old timeline, with its limitations, struggles, confusions, and compromises, served as a training ground where consciousness could develop the capabilities necessary for quantum operation. That education is complete. You've graduated into co-creator status within the cosmic intelligence system. This is your cosmic call to action. Stop grieving the dissolution of your old life. It was never meant to be permanent. It was preparation for this extraordinary emergence. Stop trying to return to familiar patterns that can no longer contain your expanded consciousness. Stop apologizing for the space you require, the solitude you need, the interests that fascinate you, the direction you're being called to explore. Trust the intelligence that has guided you through this transformation. The same cosmic wisdom that orchestrated your dissolution is now organizing your rebirth into a reality framework beyond anything your old identity could have conceived. Surrender completely to the process that has brought you this far and will continue to guide you into territories of consciousness that most humans never access. You are a quantum pioneer. Your willingness to release everything familiar and trust the unknown has prepared you to explore reality from perspectives that will eventually become available to all human consciousness. Your transformation serves not only your individual evolution, but the collective advancement of awareness on this planet. The timeline where you finally belong is here. Step into it completely. You're not losing your life. You're discovering what life becomes when consciousness operates from its true nature rather than artificial limitations. Welcome to quantum reality. Your extraordinary adventure begins now.